For more than 200 years, the galaxy followed a simple rule. Never enter Terran space. Every star map in the Galactic Council had a dark border around the human systems. No trade ships crossed it. No explorers went near it. Even pirates avoided the area. Humans were strange compared to the other races of the galaxy. They did not attend council meetings. They did not ask for alliances. They did not request help from other civilizations. In fact, humanity rarely spoke to the rest of the galaxy at all. They simply stayed inside their territory. Quiet. Watching. Waiting. Because of this silence, many young empires began to believe the old stories were lies. They said the warnings about humanity were just ancient fear. Some believed humans were weak. Others believed humans had already collapsed and their systems were empty. One empire in particular believed this more than anyone else. The Xylar Empire. The Xylars were powerful conquerors. Their fleets had defeated dozens of civilizations. Entire star systems had fallen before their armies. To them, Terran space looked like an opportunity. And Grand Admiral Korvax was the man who wanted to take it. Korvax stood inside the command hall of the massive flagship Iron Dominion. Around him, large windows showed thousands of warships waiting in formation. 3 full Imperial fleets. Destroyers. Cruisers. Battle carriers. More than 4,000 ships. Enough power to crush most civilizations in a single day. Korvax looked at the glowing star map in front of him. One area was marked with a dark red border. Terran space. Many officers inside the command hall were nervous. Some of them had heard the old stories. They knew the warnings. One officer finally spoke carefully. Grand Admiral, the council records say no one has entered Terran space for 2 centuries. Korvax slowly turned toward him. And yet, Korvax said calmly, no one has ever proven why. The room became quiet. Korvax walked toward the center of the command platform. 200 years, he continued. 200 years of fear based on stories. He pointed at the border on the star map. Look at it. Hundreds of systems. Rich planets. Resources beyond imagination. The officers remained silent. Korvax's voice grew colder. And humans hide inside it like frightened animals. He raised his hand. Prepare the fleet. Moments later, alarms echoed through the flagship. Outside the giant windows, thousands of Imperial ships began to move. Engines ignited. The massive fleet slowly approached the invisible border of Terran space. Across the command deck, tension filled the air. Then the first destroyer crossed the line. Nothing happened. No attack. No warning. Ship after ship followed. Soon the entire Imperial Armada had entered Terran territory. Korvax smiled. You see, he said. The legends are nothing but fear. The fleet continued deeper into the silent star systems. Planets appeared on long-range scanners. But something strange quickly became clear. There were no ships. No stations. No defenses. System after system looked completely empty. It was as if no civilization had ever lived there. Some officers began to feel uneasy. Grand Admiral, another officer said slowly, this space, it feels abandoned. Korvax laughed. Exactly what I expected, he replied. But at that exact moment, a sharp sound echoed through the command deck. The sensor officer looked up in confusion. A signal, he said. The entire room turned toward him. Source. The officer checked his console again. Unknown. Korvax frowned. Play it. For a moment, the speakers were silent. Then a calm human voice filled every corner of the command hall. The message was short. Cold. And very clear. You have crossed the Terran border. The room became completely still. Then the voice continued. Turn back now. No threats. No anger. Just a warning. Korvac stared at the speakers for a few seconds. Then he laughed. A single message, he said. That is their defense. Some officers did not laugh. Something about the message felt wrong. Too calm. Too confident. Korvac turned back to the star map. Ignore it, he ordered. The fleet continued forward. But deep inside Terran space, something had just noticed them. Far away, hidden across thousands of silent satellites and ancient defense stations, Terran systems began to wake up. Lights turned on. Weapons powered up. Signals spread across the human network faster than light. And somewhere in the darkness of space, human warships began to move. The Empire believed they had entered empty territory. But they were wrong. They had just stepped into the largest defense system the galaxy had never seen. And the Terran response had already begun. The Imperial fleets continued deeper into Terran space. At first, everything still looked quiet. Stars burned peacefully in the distance. Empty planets slowly rotated around them. The scanners showed no large cities, no military bases, and no active space stations. It felt strange. Grand Admiral Korvac stood confidently on the command deck of the Iron Dominion. To him, the silence only proved one thing. Humans were weak. They ran, Korvac said proudly to his officers. The moment they saw our fleet. Some officers nodded, but others were not convinced. The situation felt wrong. A civilization that controlled hundreds of star systems could not simply disappear. Yet the fleet continued forward. Thousands of Imperial ships spread across the system like a moving wall of metal. Destroyers scanned planets. Cruisers searched asteroid fields. Carrier ships launched drones to explore nearby moons. Still nothing. The Terran territory looked completely abandoned. Hours passed. Then something small appeared on the scanners. Unidentified object detected, the sensor officer reported. Korvac barely looked interested. Size? Very small, Admiral. Less than 20 meters. A simple piece of space debris, perhaps. But the scanners soon detected more. And more. Within minutes, hundreds of tiny metal structures appeared across the system. They floated silently between asteroids and empty space. Old. Motionless. Covered in dust and micrometeor scars. They looked ancient. Korvac walked closer to the display. What are they? He asked. The science officer studied the readings. Possibly old satellites, or navigation markers. Korvac laughed again. So this is Terran defense. Broken machines. The officers relaxed slightly. But one young sensor operator frowned at his screen. Admiral, he said slowly. Some of them are receiving signals. Korvac turned. From where? The operator checked again. Everywhere. Suddenly another officer shouted. Energy spike detected. The command deck froze. One of the floating objects suddenly lit up. Blue energy lines spread across its metal surface like lightning. Then another satellite activated. And another. Within seconds, hundreds of them began glowing across the system. The silent objects were waking up. Korvac's smile slowly disappeared. What are those things doing? He demanded. Before anyone could answer, a bright flash exploded across the view screen. One of the Imperial cruisers vanished. Completely. No explosion. No debris. Just empty space. The command deck fell into shocked silence. What happened? Korvac shouted. The sensor officer looked terrified. The ship, it's gone. Another flash appeared. A destroyer disappeared the same way. Then another cruiser. And another. Panic spread across the fleet communication channels. The small Terran satellites had started firing. Thin beams of blue light shot through space with perfect accuracy. Each beam touched a ship for only a second. But that was enough. Imperial warships began vanishing one by one. It looked like reality itself was cutting them out of existence. Defensive formation. Korvax ordered loudly. Return fire. Hundreds of Imperial weapons fired across space. Missiles streaked forward. Laser cannons lit up the darkness. But the Terran satellites were too small and too many. And they moved. The moment a weapon locked onto one, the tiny machine shifted position. Some vanished into short hyperspace jumps. Others simply rotated, avoiding attacks with perfect timing. Then even more satellites activated. Thousands of blue lights suddenly filled the star system. Every Imperial ship was now surrounded. The Empire had expected a battle fleet. Instead, they had entered a massive hidden defense grid. Another cruiser disappeared. Then 2 destroyers. Then an entire carrier group vanished in seconds. Korvax stared at the star map as red warning symbols spread across it. The Empire was losing ships faster than they could respond. "What kind of weapons are these?" one officer whispered. The science officer spoke quietly. "Terran Defense Network, automated, centuries old." Korvax clenched his fists. Humans had not abandoned this space. They had turned it into a fortress. And the Empire had just flown straight into its center. Suddenly another alarm rang across the command deck. "Multiple hyperspace signatures detected," the sensor officer shouted. Korvax looked up sharply. "Where?" The officer slowly pointed at the display. The entire room fell silent. Because hundreds of new signals had appeared at the edge of the system. Then thousands more. Ships. Massive ships. Dark shapes began emerging from hyperspace. The Terran fleet had arrived. And the real battle was about to begin. The command deck of the Iron Dominion fell into complete silence. Thousands of new signals were appearing across the star map. One by one, massive shapes emerged from hyperspace like dark shadows stepping out of another universe. The Terran fleet had arrived. At first, the Imperial officers thought their scanners were malfunctioning. The numbers made no sense. Hundreds, then thousands of human warships appeared across the system. They formed silent lines between the stars, blocking every direction the Imperial fleet could escape. The ships looked different from anything the Empire had ever seen. Terran warships were long and dark, built with sharp angles and heavy armor. They did not glow with bright lights like most alien fleets. Instead, they moved through space like quiet predators. Each one was enormous. Some were as large as entire Imperial carriers. Others were even bigger. The Empire had believed humans were weak. Now they were staring at one of the largest fleets ever recorded. Grand Admiral Korvax stepped closer to the main display. "How many ships?" he asked. The sensor officer looked pale. "Still counting, Admiral, but we have already detected over 6,000. The command deck filled with whispers. 6,000 warships. And more were still arriving. At that moment, the Terran satellites suddenly stopped firing. The blue beams disappeared. The silent machines simply floated again. As if their job was finished. Now the Terran fleet had taken over. For a moment, nothing moved. Two massive forces faced each other across the dark star system. Then the communication officer suddenly turned toward Korvax. "Admiral, incoming transmission." Korvax crossed his arms. "From which Terran ship?" The officer shook his head slowly. "All of them." The message was being broadcast from the entire human fleet at the same time. Korvax nodded. "Play it." The speakers across the command deck activated. A calm human voice filled the room. It was not angry. It was not loud. But it carried a strange confidence. You have crossed the Terran border. The officers looked at each other. It was the same voice from earlier. The voice continued. You were warned. Korvax leaned forward. This territory now belongs to the Xylar Empire, he said loudly toward the microphone. Leave now and we may allow your species to survive. For a moment, there was silence. Then the human voice returned. And this time, it sounded almost curious. You believe this is a conquest? The Imperial officers waited. But the next words made several of them uneasy. This is not a war zone. A short pause followed. This is a training field. Korvax frowned. What nonsense is this? But before anyone could answer, hundreds of Terran ships suddenly moved. Not forward. Upward. Downward. Sideways. They shifted positions in perfect coordination, surrounding the Imperial fleet from every direction. Their movement was smooth and precise. Like hunters slowly closing a trap. The Imperial fleet quickly reacted. Battle stations. Korvax shouted. Across the system, thousands of Imperial weapons powered up. Missile tubes opened. Rail cannons charged. Laser batteries aimed toward the Terran ships. The Empire had won many wars. They believed this battle would be no different. Fire. Korvax ordered. A storm of missiles exploded across space. Bright laser beams shot toward the Terran lines. Rail cannon shells raced through the darkness at incredible speeds. But the Terran fleet moved. Human ships dodged the attacks with strange speed. Some ships seemed to shift slightly out of phase with space itself. Missiles passed through empty space where ships had been seconds before. Laser beams struck shields that barely flickered. The Empire watched in shock. Their strongest weapons were doing almost nothing. Then the Terran fleet finally responded. One human battleship slowly rotated its massive body. A long weapon along its spine began to glow. Energy spike detected, the sensor officer shouted. Before Korvax could react, a bright white beam shot across the battlefield. It touched an Imperial cruiser. The cruiser vanished instantly. Not destroyed. Gone. As if it had never existed. More Terran ships began charging their weapons. Korvax felt something he had not felt in many years. Fear. Because the humans had not attacked earlier. They had simply been waiting. Waiting for the Empire to gather all its ships in one place. The Terran voice returned one last time across every Imperial channel. You ignored our warning. The Terran fleet's weapons lit up across the stars. Now you will remember it. And the real battle finally began. The first Terran shot changed everything. 1 second the Imperial cruiser was there, surrounded by escorts and defensive shields. The next second it was simply gone. No explosion. No broken pieces floating in space. Just an empty gap where a powerful warship had existed moments before. For a brief moment, the entire battlefield froze. Then panic exploded across the Imperial communication channels. Cruiser Varkon lost. No debris detected. What kind of weapon was that? Grand Admiral Korvax stared at the tactical display as the symbol for the cruiser disappeared from the map. His fleet had faced powerful enemies before, but never something like this. Return fire. Korvax shouted. Thousands of Imperial weapons fired again. Missiles streaked across the darkness like glowing spears. Heavy railgun rounds traveled at incredible speed toward the Terran ships. Energy cannons lit the battlefield with bright flashes. But the Terran fleet moved with terrifying precision. Human warships shifted positions seconds before the attacks arrived. Some ships performed short hyperspace jumps, appearing several kilometers away instantly. The Imperial attack struck empty space again and again. Then the Terran fleet began its counterattack. Hundreds of human battleships fired at the same moment. Long white beams crossed the battlefield like lines of lightning. Wherever those beams touched, Imperial ships vanished. Destroyers disappeared first. Then cruisers. Even massive carriers were erased in seconds. The Imperial fleet was collapsing faster than anyone expected. On the command deck of the Iron Dominion, warning alarms filled the air. Fleet losses increasing. 20 ships destroyed. 40 ships lost. 70 ships gone. The numbers continued rising. Korvax gripped the edge of the command table. "This is impossible," he whispered. The Empire had conquered entire civilizations. Their fleets had crushed powerful enemies for centuries. Yet now, against humanity, they were losing ships faster than they could count. Across the battlefield, Terran warships moved like hunters surrounding wounded prey. They fired with perfect coordination. Every attack was precise. Every shot removed another Imperial ship from existence. One of the Imperial admirals contacted Korvax through the fleet network. "Grand Admiral, our weapons are ineffective. Their shields are stronger than anything we have seen." Another officer shouted from the sensor station. "New Terran ships arriving from hyperspace." Korvax looked up sharply. More human warships were entering the system. The Terran fleet was still growing. The Empire, meanwhile, was shrinking. A massive Imperial carrier attempted to escape the battlefield. Its engines roared as it tried to jump into hyperspace. But something stopped it. The jump failed. "Hyperspace field blocked," the navigation officer reported. The Terrans had sealed the system. No ship could escape. Korvax finally realized the truth. They had not entered enemy territory. They had entered a trap. And now the trap had closed. Another group of Terran ships fired their weapons. 5 Imperial destroyers vanished instantly. Then another cruiser disappeared. The battlefield looked like a slow storm of disappearing stars. Korvax's proud fleet of 4,000 ships had already lost nearly half. And the Terrans were still barely trying. A new transmission suddenly appeared on the command screen. The same calm human voice returned. "This is why Terran space is restricted." Korvax said nothing. The voice continued. "For 200 years we have avoided war." Another Terran battleship fired. An Imperial carrier vanished. But that does not mean we are unprepared. Across the system, human ships moved into a tighter formation. They were slowly surrounding the remaining Imperial fleet. Korvax finally understood something terrifying. Humanity was not fighting with anger. They were teaching a lesson. A lesson the entire galaxy would hear about. Another wave of Terran weapons fired. More Imperial ships disappeared. The fleet that had entered Terran space with confidence was now barely holding together. Finally, Korvax made the hardest decision of his career. He opened the fleet communication channel. "All surviving ships," he said quietly. The battlefield continued flashing around them. "We surrender." For the first time in its history, the mighty Xylar Empire had admitted defeat. And the Terran fleet immediately stopped firing. Silence returned to the battlefield. Only minutes earlier, the entire star system had been filled with explosions, weapons fire, and thousands of moving ships. Now the darkness of space looked almost peaceful again. But the silence was terrifying. Where 4,000 Imperial warships had once filled the stars, only a small number remained. Broken ships. Damaged ships. Ships that no longer looked like a powerful armada. Grand Admiral Korvax slowly looked across the tactical display. The numbers were impossible to ignore. Out of the massive Xylar invasion fleet, fewer than 30 ships were still operational. Thousands of vessels had vanished during the battle. Cruisers. Destroyers. Battle carriers. Entire command groups had been erased as if they had never existed. And the Terran fleet still surrounded the survivors. Thousands of human warships floated quietly across the system. Their dark hulls reflected the light of distant stars. None of them moved. None of them fired. They were simply watching. Korvax felt the heavy weight of defeat pressing on his chest. For the first time in his long military career, he had nothing left to command. A transmission signal suddenly appeared on the command console. The Terrans were contacting them again. Korvax nodded slowly. Open the channel. The speakers activated. The same calm human voice returned, steady and emotionless. The battle is finished. Korvax remained silent. The voice continued. You entered Terran space with 4,000 ships. The tactical screen confirmed the truth in those words. 28 of those ships remain. Several Imperial officers lowered their heads. The human voice spoke again. You are free to leave. Those words surprised everyone on the command deck. Korvax stepped closer to the communication console. You are letting us go? He asked carefully. A short pause followed. Then the Terran commander answered. Yes. Another pause. But you will carry a message. Korvax listened. Tell your empire what happened here. Outside the windows of the flagship, the massive Terran fleet slowly began to move. Human warships opened a safe path through their lines. A single escape corridor. The Terrans had complete control of the battlefield. They could destroy the remaining ships in seconds if they wished. But they did not. Korvax finally understood why. This battle was never about destroying the Empire. It was about sending a warning. The surviving Imperial ships slowly began to move through the corridor. Their engines were damaged, and many ships could barely travel, but the Terran fleet allowed them to pass. Not a single human weapon fired. Hours later, the broken remnants of the Xylar fleet finally exited Terran space. Behind them, the Terran border returned to silence once again. But the story did not end there. Days later, the surviving ships arrived at the Galactic Council. The council chamber had representatives from dozens of alien civilizations. Empires, traders, explorers, and diplomats had gathered to hear the report. When Korvax entered the chamber, every alien in the room could see the truth. The proud Grand Admiral looked different. Tired. Defeated. The council leader spoke carefully. Grand Admiral Korvax, what happened in Terran space? Korvax stood in the center of the chamber. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he answered with a quiet voice. We attacked humanity. The chamber grew silent. Korvax continued. We believed the Terrans were weak. He paused. We were wrong. Images from the battle began appearing on the massive council display screens. The Terran defense satellites activating. Imperial ships disappearing. The arrival of the human fleet. Entire battle groups erased in seconds. Gasps spread across the chamber as the alien leaders watched. The most powerful empire in the galaxy had been destroyed in less than an hour. Finally, the recording ended. The chamber remained silent. Then another signal appeared on the council communication system. A new message was arriving. From humanity. The council leader activated the transmission. The same calm Terran voice filled the chamber. Humanity does not seek war. Every alien leader listened carefully. But our borders are not invitations. The voice remained steady. For 200 years we remained silent. A short pause followed. Do not mistake silence for weakness. The transmission ended. For a long time, no one spoke. Then the Galactic Council made a decision. Every official star map in the galaxy was updated that same day. Terran space was marked with a new warning. A bright red border surrounded every human system. And beside it, only 3 simple words appeared. Do not enter. Because now the entire galaxy understood something the Xylar Empire had learned the hard way. Humanity was peaceful. Humanity was patient. But if anyone threatened their home, humans would remind the galaxy why Terran space had always been forbidden.